Lauren, we're live. You were starting today, remember?
I can't remember anything. I'm 3 sips deep on the Angry Orchard. The 1 p.m. Been a 60-hour work week already, so that's where I am on the Friday
For the
afternoon.
record, this is a highly respectable social media platform, so we may or may not be indulging in adult beverages. To be fair, I'm here in Los Angeles, 10 a.m., and I'm still on my coffee. That's about all I can handle. But Lauren is keeping an eye on the YouTube channel for Tech Bros Show, and she will take a sip every time we get a new subscriber. We're going to hit triple digits pretty soon, which I thought was awesome. And then I tell my daughter, and she's like, unless you're at 500,000 subscribers, you basically don't exist. So
Yeah, that's how all the kids think about this,
yeah,
and that's not the way you think about growth, because that's all top of funnel stuff. How many viewers you have, how many subscribers you have. Really, you want to get them to the bottom of the funnel. You want to get them to convert, to sell them something like like a reverse ETL panini press, for example. We're going to go into reverse ETL panini presses today.
we're going to get into some hardcore tech marketing stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. I think the theme of this episode here is we're just going to go for a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense, and there's a bunch of nonsense out there right now. Both you and I, Mary, have a lot of strong opinions about just really silly nonsense that goes on in the world right now. And I think it's going to be fun.
We have strong opinions, but we're putting the show out there, having fun with it. But I was talking to a friend this week who was kind of describing back to me how he sees the show. He's a tech bro, just like us, and he said, he's enjoying hearing conversations that might be happening in private and just hearing publicly, and not privately because they're inappropriate, although maybe some of them are. But privately because a lot of people are just afraid to say what's really going on, partly out of fear of hurting people's feelings, but partly out of fear of upsetting the status quo in our industry, right?
Yeah, nobody wants to bite the hand that feeds, but like the hand that feeds, all the money that comes into this space, like they're all over the place right now. All this, venture capital stuff, all these funds that have come out in the last couple of years. And we'll get into this, I guess, but
and what I've realized, again, you've I'm more experienced than you, Lauren. I've been in a few different industries. You've just mostly been in data, and I'm going to tell you what I've learned is the more you kind of speak the truth and not be afraid to bite the hand that feeds you, the more respect you get ultimately, right? Because the people at the top, they're not as afraid of speaking the truth, the ones who really got the money. So we've got a lot of people chiming in already saying hello. Let's say hi to everyone. Ryan Dolly, who's launching his own show soon, which is Actual Tech Bros with his brother. And we're going to be on there. Hi, Ryan. Hi, Chris. We were just talking about Chris before we went on air. Chris Tab, someone whose name I can't see. Kelly is here. Hi, Kelly. I'll respond to your comment later, the comment you put up last night. And hi, Phil. Phil is tuning in from, I might say it wrong, Craighaven, outside of Belfast, in Northern Ireland, and Mohammed Arshad is here. So we are going to go straight into Lauren's pet peeve that she's already referred to with the panini press. Do you want me to put up the slide? Because you're going to give us a whole kind of mini.
Yeah, this is a good thing to go over here and pull up the slide. And, this Excalibur Draw. So this has been coming out more and more. It's something that everybody who works around the investment side of what's happening in tech, knows about. And there's some news that's come out this past week about just how bad some of these returns have been in some cases, for venture investing. And, the way it works, right? Just very high level, a venture capital firm, has one or more funds, right? Fund one, fund two, 100 million here, there's 200 million in the other one, whatever it is. And they raise this money from, everyone from high net worth individuals to, public pension funds, private pension funds, fund of funds. Fund of funds is the funniest because that's when they're just getting other venture capital firms money and, putting it around, or other private equity investments money. So you're making the fund out of other people's money that they have from other funds. That's where you get your Big Short Jenga metaphor right there. And sovereign wealth funds. There's a lot of places this money comes from, and one of my favorites of how just ridiculous and how overblown this has all gotten. Which, like, you don't see this on VC Twitter too much. You don't see this, like, people talk about this, but a lot of the money is actually like teachers' pension funds and state employees' pension funds, and people who have worked their whole lives, made $50,000 a year, annualized to where it's 50,000 now.
To their children, doing God's work,
right?
Real 9 to 5, go to an office or a class,
right? Like the lower and middle class, people who aren't making often lots and lots of money. Now you can have a pension fund and make a lot of money, of course, have money tied up in a pension fund, but there's a lot of that's what pays for a lot of this, right? And I've been pretty, like, one of my favorite things, actually one of the most disturbing things, is the fact that about a year ago, I got this $25 panini press that I've laid out here in this diagram of where we look at, pensioners. There's a bunch of grandmas who aren't going to get their money back. They have their money tied up in pension funds, then it goes to Sequoia or whatever. That goes into reverse ETL.
Wait,
all right, well, we got to sell some reverse ETL. How do we sell it?
Skipping a couple steps in the diagram there, Lauren. You have
on the left, right, on the left, like.
So you've got the pension funds, and again, that was in the news this week. You pointed out with, like,
it's more and more because it's juicy about how bad these funds, their investments in venture capital are. Investing in this risky asset class.
And the headline that you posted was from Business Insider, where posting the returns for the biggest pension fund, I think, in the country, CalPERS, which is in California, obviously, and the returns from their venture investments were pitiful. That's where the grandma shots come from. So what happens when these pension funds invest in venture? What takes us then over to the Bedini press? And I think that's an electric kettle on there.
Right. So let's trace this. Let's start at the panini press side. Census is a reverse ETL vendor. They want to take your data that's already in your warehouse, that's already been modeled, already been put in a database, data warehouse, whatever, somewhere, and send it back out to Salesforce or to a marketing app or whatever. They have 100 employees. If you think their average employee is probably making $200,000 a year, times 100, they're probably spending $20 million a year roughly on salaries. They've raised, more than that. So they're spending $20 million a year on salaries. They've got a few million at least, from what I can tell, in revenue. And, they're not doing the input ETL. Like, you use a different product for that the same investors have also financed. So you use one product, then you use another product where they're not even making payroll back in salary, or they're not even making, like, their payroll back to cover their payroll in revenue, like, annualized. And because they are struggling with go to market, now they're sending out electric kettles. Oh, you want to go try our product? Have an electric kettle. Enjoy the lifestyle. Make some fancy coffee. Here's a $150 electric kettle. Have a $25 panini press. Whatever gets you to try our demo.
So you, as a head of an analytics company, you're the recipient of their marketing. Lucky you, Lauren.
Lucky me.
I could use the panini press, although that does look a bit cheap.
You can't clean it. Look at this thing. There's crumbs. I've tried to clean this. I keep my kitchen fairly clean, or at least, I say I do when I'm talking to people in public on the internet. You can't clean this thing. It's not even a good panini press.
Right.
You got to scrub it and get all this stuff in here. It's not even that good of a panini it makes.
And that's grandma's money.
And that's grandma's money that's gone through several money managers, put into a marketing budget, cycled, laundered all the way through, and is it going to pay back grandma? Is that 10-year fund, that venture capital fund, going to actually get paid back? The answer is no, because they're selling, fucking panini presses out here to try and get on a demo.
So So we're critiquing that to a certain degree what we already got at in one of our shows, that influencer style marketing happening in our subset of the tech industry, and probably across many subsets of the tech industry. But more broadly, you're critiquing why do we have these companies that are
why do these companies exist, and why are there just everything's a gimmick. And like when you work at one of these companies, or you go on Twitter and this is a great product. Well, have you ever used it? Or are you just saying that because a bunch of other people said it and you want to sound cool? You might be working at one of these companies making $150,000, $200,000, $250,000 a year. Most of these companies are not going to be around 2 years from now. Who's actually paying your salary? And I think a lot of people don't think about that, because someone will say, the company pays the salary. All right, well, think about it one more. If you don't make that much money and it costs 3 or 4 times your annual revenue just to make payroll, not to mention all the other stuff you spend money on as a company, if it takes that much money just to if you're burning $5, $4, $10 for every dollar that you bring back, whose actual money is it? And if you ask people, they'll say, it's my company's money. All right, well, where'd they get the money? It's not out of the profits. The money comes from the venture capital firm. Okay, well, where did they get their money? Well, they got it from, who knows, the Saudi nationals, the Saudi national interests. They got it from a bunch of pension funds. They got it from other funds of funds. And I think a lot of people, and what's really interesting about the tech industry and why one of the biggest bullshit things about this industry is that most people are pretty liberal politically, or, moderate to liberal. They're conservative people, in American sense, Republican side, Democrat side. Most workers, most people tend to generally be, middle to left.
They claim
the fact that the logic does not whose money is this that's paying for you to make $200,000 a year to sell panini presses for demos, to trade gadgets for demos? Who's actually paying for that? Well, the answer is the middle class is paying for it. You're these pension funds are such, and there's other things in here. There's another thing that's come out recently, and you're going to hear more of these about private equity investments, venture capital investments. The University of Notre Dame got hosed on one of these. They lost a ton of money. Their endowment's not doing well. All right, well, University of Notre Dame, top 25 school in the U.S., good school. When they lose this money, who suffers? Well, the employees who work there, the professors, if they're the school's not going to have as good of professors if they can't finance the professors. Scholarships often come out of these endowment funds. So there's a lot of these cases out here that a lot of people know this and they can see it a year or two out, who work in and around this, but it's going to start domino falling. And the answer is who pays for you to sit around and, make content on the internet about reverse ETL or large language models, or reverse ETLing large language models, or other just buzzwords? Who pays for you to make that content and make, the money that you make to do that, to burn $4?
Not the customer is paying for this.
It's not the customer. It's the fucking middle class that pays for it. And so I think the fact that so many people in this industry are, left of center and, support, political interests that say we should have more social welfare and, better for the middle class. You work in an industry that is against that. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And I'm pretty liberal myself. And I know how all this nonsense game works. And I think that we're actually at a phase right now where we're going to see it play out more and more. And I think it's going to get a bit heated.
Comment here from Ricardo Ortiz, who says, this supply chain is terrifying. How many others like it exist? And I mean, we're calling out.
That's how the whole thing works.
So you're saying the whole venture capital system, or obviously what we're referring to is the modern data stack.
Modern data stack is an example from, the modern data stack, but like it's like this, everywhere. Consumer is really bad. And so the other one to look into is, in the late 2010s, there's all these, everyone remembers when there's Casper mattress company. Then there was another mattress company, and there was another mattress company. All these venture capital firms are investing in mattress companies, which, you're not really a repeat buyer of a mattress. Most of their customers buy a mattress once. Then they're, you don't buy a mattress for another 5 or 10 years.
For a while, yeah.
Right. It's not like shoes where you might buy a couple of pairs a year.
It's not like panini presses and you need a fresh one sent.
Yeah. Right. It's not like a panini press. And so that's probably the worst example of consumer of how this went wrong. But a lot of these other consumer investments, it's the same thing. And after Shopify grew, Shopify went public. Everyone was, jumping on and throwing all this pension fund money and everybody else's money into the Shopify ecosystem in the 2010s. Then all these Shopify companies are like, well, we need better data. We're spending all this money on ads. How are we doing? Oh, well, let's buy some data stacks. I guess we need a data scientist. We need an analytics engineer. We need Snowflake, whatever. And Snowflake went up because of that thing. So as that fell, then Snowflake goes up. So Snowflake's the new ecosystem. And a lot of this stuff is not from the last couple of years. The returns are going to be so horrible on so many of these funds that go back and pay back, universities, the pension funds, the everything else that I would encourage most tech employees to actually look. And you can Google around. Where's the money? Where's your salary actually coming from?
Yeah.
Who's actually paying your salary?
We have a comment here from Ryan who says there was a point where every single podcast was sponsored by a direct-to-consumer mattress company. And I think that's a good segue into our sponsor for today, which is Purple Mattresses. No, just kidding. But
Cuisinart.
Yeah. But seriously though, you and I have a show. We could be getting sponsors. We could be getting paid for this. And part of the reason that we're doing this as rogue free agents who are not sponsored by anyone, and we won't, let anyone, we've had offers people to pay to come on the show, is that we don't want to play into that. I mean, there's a point at which you have to be able to speak openly and critique some of this stuff and encourage people to stop and think about it. Anyone who wants to go deeper into it, I would suggest going back and reading all of Lauren's blogs too. I think you've got this. You've got various versions of this diagram in there.
I don't think I do. I mean, conceptually, I got to write one at some point. Ryan says, I don't understand why pension funds don't just invest in the S&P 500 and treasury bills and leave it at that. That's true. That is, well, then it kind of justifies them not existing, right? If the pension funds are just going to invest in the market through, index funds and treasury bills, why does the pension fund have the money? Shouldn't the customer, the pensioner, just have the money and then do that themselves? So it kind of justifies them not existing, the pension funds. There's also another thing here that people may not know about or think about. When you put money into these private equity funds and venture capital, private equity is a big circle. Venture capital is a small piece of it, even though they're talked about separately. But they're usually they last a few years. So when the pension fund puts money in here on behalf of all the pensioners, the beneficiaries, the future beneficiaries, that money is tied up for, it's usually 10 years, a 10-year fund. There's a little bit of variance there, but your money gets tied up in there. And so you don't see that money back really for, 10 years or whatever. Now, when you're investing in a liquid market like stocks, you can pull out whenever you want and do that. So there's a lot of funny business with how the pension fund, investment officers and the, managers there behave. And everyone has an incentive along the whole thing. And the other thing here is a lot of the pension funds do invest in stocks and bonds, directly or through some other fund or through hedge funds. Don't even get me started on hedge funds. Half of the hedge funds are just investing in, the S&P 500, but making it look like they aren't. So, there's all kinds of nonsense out there.
No, I think it's something we all need to learn about. And again, if we're true to our ideals that some of us have or claim to have of being anywhere on the left side, it's on us to research this stuff. And I'm going to segue a little bit. I want to get back to this, but segue into, you and I'm going to take your slide down, Lauren, because it's taking up the whole screen. We've talked a lot in the show about the layoffs and, obviously feel terrible for anyone who's laid off, blah, blah, blah. I want to say that actually I don't feel terrible for everyone who's laid off, because if you were collecting one of those massive salaries at a place like Facebook or some of the other massive tech companies that have questionable ethics, and you haven't been questioning that or speaking out about it, you've been collecting a lot of money, and I don't have any sympathy for you whatsoever. You go on TikTok and you see some of these people who've been laid off. If you were making $500,000 a year for a company that, contributed to the genocide in Myanmar, or that, played a part in the Cambridge Analytica leaks, or helped to propagate the QAnon conspiracy theories that have, fucked with a lot of people's lives, then, I don't really feel bad for you. And maybe it's good that you need to move on to another line of work or a different company. And I'd encourage you to, wherever you go next, it's going to hire you for a really big fat salary, because there's still lots of jobs out there. Think about the ethics before you go into it. Even Google, if you were at Google and you didn't question when Timnit Gebru, I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly, was fired, one of the big thinkers on machine learning, artificial intelligence, and the ethical questions behind that, she was let go a couple of years ago. You didn't speak up about that, then I don't have any sympathy for you if you got fired from Google. Maybe you need to question your own values a little bit.
And the other thing here, even with this, is like, is it even ethical to be in middle management when you're a middle manager reporting to another middle manager who has middle managers below you? Like, this whole bloated hierarchy, like, what are you actually doing all day? Except taking, money from wherever it's coming from, pension funds laundered through venture capital firms, or like, what are you actually doing?
We're not talking people who, again, if you were like low level working class salary at any of these places, of course, deep sympathy for you, whatever. But if once you're in these roles, like even middle management, you're making a cushy salary. We're human beings who are smart and have options, can go work lots of different places. Yeah, think about the ethics of what you're doing. If you're the product manager to the project manager to the
VP to the worst is when there's 4 levels of VPs.
Right.
You have a VP reporting to an SVP who reports to another SVP who reports to an RVP. Like, the whole alphabet soup of vice presidents that exist in places. That's another interesting thing here, is that I know so many people who are the director of this or the VP of this. Like, they manage like 1 person or 0 people. And I'm not talking about like even sales, because sales will, this person's a sales director, but they're like, carrying their own quota, running their own thing, they're an individual contributor. I'm talking about like the director of, whatever, analytics or something. And it's like 1 person. It's always been 1 person. And like, well, it's just title inflation because you need to be a director. And so I'll read resumes from people on behalf of my customers when I've hired people before. It's gotten out of control the last couple of years of like, what do these titles even mean? What do they even mean? Like, you were a senior director of like data engineering. All right, what does that mean? All right, well, let's look at what you did. Well, you had 1 person reporting to you. You were building the pipelines all yourself and doing it all. So you're really like an engineer, like you're a senior engineer, and you're not even really a tech lead. So it was you and 1 other person. But I guess the company, you told them you had to be called like a director or you would leave. And they were like, okay, this is free, whatever. Let's just make them happy. And so it's this inflation of job titles that's happened in, 0 interest rates, low interest rates era last couple of years is very interesting as well. I think that's going away too. And, I would say, I don't know, maybe take advantage of it now while you can.
Well, we have a comment from a skeptic here, Simon Podhosky. He's over in Prague. I think you're still in Prague, Simon. We met at Data Council last year, right before I met you, Lauren. I met you right after Data Council.
There's a whole rant and a half to go down.
Simon says, we'll save that for another show. Simon says, isn't this a fully general argument against financial markets? I mean, from my standpoint, no. It's purely a when you have the skills and privilege to collect massive salaries like we do in the tech industry, be aware of the general structure of the economy in which you work and use your power to at least speak about it if you have any real ethics. But what's your response to that, Lauren?
I think it's more about risk. Like when you're investing in the tech industry, it's all, risk. And it turns into, we'll use the example from like the Census thing earlier, data stuff that kind of works around Snowflake, that ecosystem, modern data, whatever. Like there's, all right, so Snowflake has this many customers, there's this many data warehouses that are out there with BigQuery, there's this many customers in the market that have this, 1,000, 10,000, whatever, that's your size. Now that's going to grow a little bit, next year, the year after, probably. And then you have all this stuff that plugs into it. So now, like your reverse ETL, your, transformation tool, your anything else. Now you have to assume that something's already in place because you're selling to something that's already in place, right? And so then you get your ETL, your transformation, your, if a BI tool only works on, with Snowflake or whatever, like Sigma or something. Now you are taking more of a risk because the TAM is smaller. The total market you can sell into is smaller. Then when you get other things like data observability, well, why do you have data observability? Well, it's because one layer down, you made all these DBT models, and now you can't manage them. Or you've made a bunch of Airflow jobs, and now it's too complicated for a human to visually manage, and so now you have to buy this other tool. And so in all these ecosystems, and the Shopify ecosystem is the same way, Salesforce ecosystem's the same way. The further and further you get from like the core of like what is the hub of the ecosystem, the more like money gets thrown into stuff, and it gets riskier and riskier. And what are the chances that like most of these companies are going to get like some kind of exit event that doesn't put certain of investors of theirs underwater? The answer is like, very few of them will. And when the investors get put underwater, it's not really their money. It's just money that they're managing. And it's someone else's money behind it. So like, it's really about risk. And it's about like, it's about risk, and it's about, frankly, what turns into a Ponzi scheme. Because once you get away from like the core element of what, what's actually being sold here, which is compute of databases on the cloud in the modern data world, you're just risk is just goes way up. And, these people whose money is being gambled don't even know that it's being gambled like this.
I'm still learning all this stuff, Simon and Lauren. Simon pointed out that he did meet both of us at a reverse ETL vendor event. Although, Simon, technically you and I met first at a locally optimistic event, which I think is run by one of the venture capitals. But we met at a few different events. Honestly, part of what I'm getting out of these Friday morning hangouts is learning more about the various Ponzi schemes. I'm doing research because we do want to do a full show on it. I started reading The Power Law, Venture Capital and the Making of the New Future by Sebastian Malaby. I don't know if it's going to be good. I only got through the intro so far. I think I'm not going to like it because I can tell already he's like an author who very much romanticizes venture capitalists rather than being critical of it. But I'll give it a chance, and then maybe we'll reach out and get him on the show. A guy I met on Hinge recommended it to me, so we'll see if that plays out.
A guy you met on Hinge recommended it?
Met on Hinge and didn't meet in real life, so we'll see if those book recommendations work out. So another wonderful thing that probably venture capital has brought to the world, the proliferation of dating apps. Should we do? We were just gonna.
Yeah, but Mary, what's on your mind? I could rant all day about about shady
Yeah.
financing. What's
Yeah, I mean, my pet peeves, Kelly Hopkins, who's in the comments, was like, I was like, guess what our top pet peeves are going to be. And she guessed for you, she was like, for Lauren, it's going to be either the title analytics engineer or DBT. So good for you for doing something different. And for me, she guessed the patriarchy, because that's generally my vibe, you know. No, I'm not even going to get into that today. Sorry to disappoint you, Kelly. I'll do another show on that. One thing that gets me, and you know, we don't have to go into this too much, is like, for me, I've been in tech 2 years, worked for some Silicon Valley companies, been exposed to a lot of them. One thing that I find funny and a little bit disturbing is what I call founder disease, which is like, everybody thinks they have to be a founder. Like the data shows certainly the number of people founding companies is going up, you know, a lot of it to do with the pandemic, obviously now with the layoffs and stuff. And yes, I'm all for innovation and ambition, and, you know, whether you're 13 or 60 years old, like, do your thing. But I've seen that there's this feeling for people in Silicon Valley in their early 20s that like, I have to found a company. And to me, that's just like so weird. Like, go learn some shit first. And again, yes, Kelly, you get a sticker, by the way, because your guesses were good. To me, it's like an anti-innovation thing. Like, if you're really smart and really have something to build, you know, probably learn from others first. And I guess this is what gets to me about it, is the people I hear doing this and see doing it, they're not driven by an idea. Like, right. Elizabeth Holmes, like, did a lot of things wrong, but at least she had an idea and a vision. Very misguided. But like, I have more appreciation for that, for someone who really wants to, you know, not even change the world, but like has a solid idea, rather than like, my idea is that I want to be a founder. Because to me, that's all about ego and money. It's just a weird phenomenon to me.
Sure. What with this founders, I think that even relates to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like, well, there wouldn't be as many tech founders if there weren't all this, you know, free money available. Like, it's supply and demand. Well, there's all this money available. We got to have somebody, you know, we got to send the money somewhere.
And you're the tech pro who's ready to do it. Yeah, that's true. It's part of.
Yeah, it's this whole like, you know, cycle.
Exactly. And then my other pet peeve, and maybe we'll do a whole show on this, is everything that's embodied by Lex Friedman, the podcaster who's somehow affiliated with MIT. He's been called out quite a lot for being a grifter, one of our favorite words. I think we need to have as our subtitle, Tech Bros, we talk about Ponzi schemes and grifters.
Yes.
One of those intellectual grifters who's like developed this massive following on Twitter and through his podcast, talking about all the things that are, you know, very popular nowadays, AI and AI basically, and is affiliated with MIT, but really puts himself out there as if he's like a top professor at MIT. The critiques of him calling him out are very much out there, but for some reason he's still like, I have sat around various firesides with tech bros in various cities across the US, and they'll sit there and talk about the Lex Friedman podcast as if like that's the only possible source of discussion, you know. Right. Like why don't we talk about
is he like Joe Rogan? I've seen one or two things he's done. Is he like Joe Rogan vibes, or is he like more academic-y? Or
he's more academic-y. The podcasts are like 12 hours long. He's like very much the Elon Musk vibe. But I do need to do more research. In typical tech pro fashion, I didn't research it enough before coming on and talking about it. You know, I was like, I'll just talk about Lex Friedman. But look up two things. Look up on Y Combinator their critique of Lex Friedman. I'll give you the top line here because I did have this.
Is it from Paul Graham, the guy who runs Y Combinator? Yeah,
someone who got a big discussion going on Y Combinator.
And Hacker News, or
on Hacker News, who goes by the name TCoff91. I don't know who that is. He says Lex Friedman misrepresents his role at MIT to make himself sound more accomplished than he really is, and the way he went about putting out his self-driving car research directly to the press instead of going through peer review is shady. This guy is a cringeworthy grifter. He's trying to be viewed as some AI expert, but he's totally full of shit. And it's a good time to be calling out people like him, because suddenly everybody is an AI expert. He's been leading the way in being like a bullshit AI expert. And the other person to look up who's really called out Lex Friedman well is on Twitter. Look up a professor from Caltech named Lior, Lior Pachter. So his handle is LPACHTER. He's a legit professor at Caltech, who's done a whole thread about Lex Friedman and how he is, again, an intellectual grifter. And I mean, what I would like to see is like, let's not sit around and talk about Lex Friedman's podcast. Let's talk about people who are doing actual good, like, tech journalism. Like Wired still puts good stuff out. You know, at the major papers, we have some good tech reporters. Why don't tech bros sit around and by the fireside and chit chat about that rather than listening to hoaxes like Lex Friedman?
That's interesting. It's interesting what you brought up too, because there's also a big divide in AI right now between like the academic people who like work for universities or they're professors or chairs or whatever, and then people who are out like building, you know, various AI things. Like Y Combinator, you know, they do batches, and like the current batch that's going through has all of these AI companies. Obviously, everyone's doing this AI, that AI. One of my good friends is actually doing an AI thing right now with Y Combinator. Maybe we can have him on at some point. But there's a big divide between like the academic people and what's going on with people actually building companies. And one of the things about OpenAI and, you know, everything that's coming out in the last, I don't know, 6 months or so is like, what part of the stack are these companies actually going to be built in? Like Microsoft and Google are going to probably own a lot of like the compute and like in any supply chain. Like they're going to own a lot of like what gets computed like on their clouds and on their, you know, machines. They're going to make a ton of money from it. And where is this all actually going to play out? And are these AI companies that are being developed now, is it just kind of like adding a little wrapper on top of what Google already has, or are you doing
where does AWS
differently? There's a lot of interesting stuff that's going to come up because you know, we're in a run up, we're in a gold rush now, and it's interesting. And I already see this, Mary. I'll do one more point here. Is every time there's a gold rush of something, there's a new job title that comes out. You know, data scientist, data engineer, analytics engineer. Now we're doing all this AI stuff for now there's prompt engineer. There's already prompt engineer. So, you know, the powers that be, different founders, different like marketing teams, like, all right, what's a prompt engineer? And they do this because if you
what is a prompt engineer?
I don't know. Who the fuck knows? There's like probably 5 prompt engineers out there right now. But like,
I'm going to add it to my LinkedIn keywords right after this and see if I get
recruited. There's a few out there already. And like, I even saw this week a law firm was hiring a prompt engineer for something. And so like it's starting already, the prompt engineer. And it's interesting because how far, like, whatever these new job titles emerge that are like some variant of software engineer, but like the person's not actually like writing software or deploying software. They're kind of like working on an interface that's abstracted a few layers up from the software. Like a lot of data scientists, I guess, fall into that. I mean, like a lot of people fall into that in their day-to-day roles. But when you make a new job title around it, and it's blank engineer, you know, it's a couple layers up from, you know, the infrastructure and software, and you're kind of working on GUIs and a couple layers up. That's always a red flag to me. And I find that more interesting than anything because people get attached to their job titles and their job industries. And if you can win the battle of prompt engineers and you can be like, we're blah, blah, blah AI, like the prompt engineering company. Like Salesforce. Like Salesforce has pretty unopinionated, weak products. And so they have all these Salesforce engineers and they have their whole conference and everything. Analytics engineer, same thing. Like anyone who has the ability to win the title of prompt engineer as a company is going to make a lot of money, and they could have a terrible product. I don't know.
What we need to do when we sign off from today's show is go buy all the domain names for like prompt engineer school and academy, set that up, start charging somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000 per student to train them as prompt engineers. We'll take a day to figure out what the curriculum is going to be.
We're going to sell courses. Mary and Lauren, prompt engineering experts, and then we write a blog post on it. Prompt engineering is the future. Here's how prompt engineering works. And then what you do is a couple of people who are already prompt engineers, they'll start sharing it on LinkedIn and on Twitter and whatever else. And then they make their own like user-generated content. Like, I agree with this article. Here are the 5 things I learned in my first 90 days as a prompt engineer. And then they make that article. Then that gets spinning. And then someone else goes, this sounds interesting. Then someone goes, as a prompt engineer, you can make $20,000 more dollars. When I was just a data scientist, I was making $148,000 a year. Prompt engineers make $160,000. Here's proof. And then that's it. The game's over. You just have to spin that around and people go, oh, I can make $20,000 more dollars a year. Maybe I'll do prompt engineering. And it just goes. It's been like this. It's Salesforce engineering, data science, analytics engineering. You just own the job title. And then that's the game. Like, that's the game.
Hashtag prompt engineer, folks. Look it up. Just let's wrap on this, Lauren. We didn't get to many of our pet peeves, so that's okay. We're just hanging out. Just stepping back again, you and I both work in data. Everybody's talking Chat GPT. I'm so tired of it. Everybody's got AI in their title now. I used to have AI as like the things that I'll talk about. I pulled it out because I was so embarrassed. I don't want to be affiliated with that shit anymore. But like, it was already a problem, like the hype cycle of every company and their grandmother and their cat wanting to do data science and ML when they don't actually need that. They could probably still work in Excel or maybe one step above Excel. And it's like the hype cycle was already a problem and it's just getting worse. Is that what you're saying, say, with your clients, where suddenly they're like, or maybe you're not, maybe you have smarter clients than that. I don't know.
Most of my customers are firing people. Most of my customers are like, all right, well, nobody like there's a thing. It's like 70% of ML projects fail. 80% of ML projects fail. 90% of ML, like there's a new study like every year with different data. It's always a high number. And it's like, well, if something fails 90% of the time, we're paying multiple people a couple $100,000 a year salaries to do it. And they're using compute that costs anywhere from the thousands to millions of dollars. Why are we flushing away all this money? Oh, I guess we're in a recession. Let's stop flushing it away.
So the people who are actually decision makers are making cuts, even though like the public sentiment.
Yeah, well, their budget's all dried up.
Yeah.
Like there's no money to pay for this. Like, these science projects that exist at companies, like there's no money to pay for it right now in a lot of cases. And you're seeing that with a lot of like AWS and what they report and like how they've decelerated on revenue. A lot of the cloud stuff has decelerated on revenue. Like last couple of years, up, and now it's tailing off a little bit because there's not a lot of room for all these science projects to be financed at various companies. So yeah,
data's kind of been, people have been calling it a business team. It's kind of been R&D teams, really. Which if you're launching an R&D team, you know that's a risk. It's science, and that there's that you're not going to get a return on your value immediately anyway. Whereas people were expecting data. Is this drink number 2? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Time. We're going to wrap in a minute. Time to sign up for our YouTube channel. If anybody can hop over there, I'll put the link out in the comments afterwards. Tech Bro of the Week. We didn't do one. Let's call ourselves the Tech Bros of the Week because
no, why not?
I've had a long week. Lauren,
we make the rules here.
We make the rules. I do want to announce next Friday's show. Super excited about it. We've got a bunch of cool shows lined up for the next month. We're finally doing the one I've wanted to do from the beginning, which is the intersection of technology and pornography got two great guests. One is Kathleen Richardson from the UK, so she's legit. You know, anyone with an accent from over there is totally legit.
I think that's called a fetish. If we're talking
Formerly, yeah, formerly of MIT. I forget which organization she's with now. She writes about AI and sex robots and some of the potential issues for the future, potentially, of humanity. The other guest, also an academic, she's a postdoc at McGill University in Montreal, Antonia Hernandez. She's both an artist and an academic who is out there expressing and writing things about live camming, a different part of the intersection of technology and porn. I have no idea really what we're going to talk about. I will do some research before that show, you know, bring maybe some numbers or data or something, possibly, maybe not, depending how much time I have to prepare for it. But the guests will be good.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I think it's something, you know, it'll be different than talking about panini presses and electric kettles. So,
yeah,
and Ponzi schemes. So, all right. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.
Bye. Bye, bros.